Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second series of live webinars. During this second series, we are exploring some of the challenges faced by the investment industry. We will inspire you on how behavioral technology helps in digitally converting your die-hard savers into investors, in retaining your investors, and in rejuvenating your client base. I am Jurgen van den Broeke, and I will be your host today. Our fifth session today will focus on digital pension and planning based on open technologies. Access to investments is becoming increasingly democratized for retail investors thanks to the rise of the digital era. Developing intuitive user interfaces that combine the best of just-in-time financial education and the latest financial apps are at a crossroad to help people prepare for their financial health and their pensions. In this webinar, Professor Andreas Hackethal will explore how this can be achieved using open technologies. Let me briefly present our current speaker. Andreas Hackethal is a professor of finance at Goethe University, Frankfurt. His research fields are personal finance, the role of financial advice, and the digitization of the financial industry. The broad interest of Professor Hackethal is reflected in his various activities. First, he heads the Household Finance Research Group at the Leibniz Institute SAFE, and he is also a co-editor or co-director, of the Data Science Institute. Second, he is a chairman of the advisory board of the German regulator BaFin and a member of the Financial Innovation Working Group at the European regulator ESMA. And thirdly, he sits on the supervisory board of a number of technology companies. So let me summarize by stating that Professor Hackethal clearly values financial technology based on scientific underpinnings, which is, as you know, an appreciation we share at Everyone Invested. So following the session, we will take some time, of course, to have a Q&A. Please don't hesitate to post your questions in the chat. And without further ado, I would like to pass the word now to Andreas to take over the screen and inspire us for the next half an hour. Thank you.
Jürgen, thank you very much for these very kind words, and very glad to be here. Warm greetings to everybody from Frankfurt, and yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity of presenting you some thoughts, some very high-level consultant slides almost, and then a couple of slides on what we are working on right now. Actually, I'm not presenting any research paper in a narrow sense, although one endeavor that I'm presenting to you, and actually it's an MVP that comes out of Goethe University in the space of digital pension planning. There are some research projects around it, and this has quite a history. So what to expect from the next 30 minutes or so? I brought along some slides, and I'm going to start out by defining the field, the space of digital pension planning, why it is important, but why it is also so challenging, and why this nut has not been cracked so far, at least from my perspective, and what are some avenues for the future, especially here in Germany, which is behind, I'd say, in this space, but at the same point is a large country, of course, 80+ million people. Many of them will retire, and many haven't saved enough. The situation or the landscape is extremely complex, so that's a fairly tough nut for politicians, but also for the industry, how to, at the end, encourage people, those with a need, to save more for their retirement, given that the public scheme will not be sufficient over the next couple of decades. Okay, I have actually a view at participants who is there, and also at the chat, and maybe Jürgen, if so, feel free to drop a note or raise your hand But otherwise we'll have question Q&A afterwards. So I'm going to share my screen. Yes, cut use, and so I'll start out actually with a couple of slides, and then if time allows, I also have a little demo of our digital pension planning tool. I called it an MVP because it is already in testing, but the test results were on the one hand promising, on the other hand there's still plenty to do along this line. All right, so here we go. Digital pension planning, maybe as opposed to digital pension reporting. So in Benelux and in Sweden and so in Scandinavia also, I know that governments or some agencies, sometimes they are public-private partnerships, have erected platforms where people can have a look at their pension pots and also gain a consolidated view, sometimes or mostly not across all pillars, but across the most important ones. So this is already there, but still acceptance rates, as I heard, are not terrific. So this is reporting, and the next step will of course be planning. So I was a bit bold of calling this digital pension planning. My little talk here. So as a motivation, I mean, it's needless to say that this is a pain point for many people. And here I look at a group of 35 to 45 years old. These are people who have an income and who have still some time to go until they retire. So they have some opportunities to save more. And sorry for the German here, but these are scans of an article that was published back in July in a women's magazine, one of the largest in Germany, called Brigitte. And this magazine is addressing especially 35 to 45 plus minus year old women. And they have this article that says, oh, finally we have transparency. Finally, there is pension transparency on the horizon. That's the title. And then it says, do you know how much money to expect once you retire? Of course, that says congrats, but then you're among a few. So most people, if you talk to people on the street, and not only on the street, all these surveys tell us that people don't have a good prior, don't have precise beliefs on what to expect. Savings, that's a precondition. If you don't know where you start off from, it's difficult to build a plan. Okay, so that's of course the general goal that has been pursued by many governments or many countries, let's put it this way, to allow or to provide their citizens with some kind of pension transparency. Germany is behind, so that's a late use case here. And as many of you that had a look at Germany recently know, there has been a law that has been enacted the last end of 2020 already. And this law actually says that there will be a central agency installed at the public pension scheme, Deutsche Rentenversicherung, and this agency will provide these services. So there will be a public entity actually that draws together the information on for an individual, and these are all insurance-like contracts only. So this is a very narrow definition of pension, but immerhin. So anyways, they are collecting this and then providing it to individuals. That's a reporting service, and it's about to start this year, maybe in Q3 on a voluntary basis. So voluntary for pension information providers, and that might then turn into an obligation or mandatory service of next year. So what we did here, and this is why I'm showing you this article, is also to give you a flavor where we are. So we are not the public service, but we have started out, and if I say we, then this is people at Goethe University, but with a couple of other friends and family, if I may say so, from other research institutions, but also from companies. And there's an association, Deutsche Renteninformation e.V., so a Verein, whose mandate is to promote this kind of transparency. And I've been had the honor to leading or still leading this association. So it's a group of stakeholders, but this is all publicly funded and neutral and independent, and all the property rights are with the Verein and with Goethe University. So here I'm talking as a university member, professor, but not as a researcher necessarily, but actually as somebody who pushes this this topic and who builds in a team, who builds and has been building a technology, a tool that shall provide pension transparency for people. And today I want to share some experience from early tests and also what we are doing, and also show you a demo of this MVP. So this article was actually, so the journalist tested the platform, says, all right, first time ever I had the transparency and it's cool, but it was challenging. And then it says, all right, dear readers, if you're also interested in this topic, why don't you participate in a test campaign? Here's the website, and you will participate in a survey, and then you'll get the chance of testing the survey. So that's what we did, and this tells you, and 1,000 readers, mostly women, participated, and we gained quite some revealing insights, also on usability and what we have to do. So that was very, but it also shows you there's great demand, of course, in particular in one group and in particular with women. So 3 slides and now take a bird's eye view on this. Yeah, so these are the consultant slides where I say, okay, what are we talking about here? So it's technology, it's data privacy, it's pension system. But at the end, we are building a tool that shall help people making better decisions. Okay, so it's about the customer, it's about the user. So such a service must be customer centric. Otherwise, it will not be accepted. Otherwise, people might have a look at it. But if it's too complicated, it's too cumbersome, it will not be used, not even once. Okay, so here's some definitions of where we stand, because at the end, we are talking fintech here, that we are using technology in the domain of pension finance. So customer centricity, very broadly speaking, is making customers better off, is helping people making better financial decisions. Okay. Now I'm breaking this down here in order to pinpoint or to point at the challenge in fintech. So I'm saying, well, there are 2 broad avenues of helping people making better decisions. One is by making transactions simpler, time-saving, more convenient. Yeah, and as I show in the next slide, this is what has been solved and fixed, and this has been extremely successful, as shown, as indicated by neo-brokers, by neo-banks, and by everything neo. If you think about them, do neo-brokers help people building better portfolios? It's not clear. Robo-advice, building better portfolios, probably, but the counterfactual is not clear. But what neo-brokers do, and robo-advisory it's not yet the rocket success. So what has been successful is neo-banks, neo-brokers, and why have they been so successful? Because they understood they were customer-centric in the sense, high efficiency and high convenience, time-saving, simplicity. So this has been solved. But the second component of helping people making better decisions is decision expertise, is decision quality, and that's difficult. Yeah. So when we think about, and that's the little metrics that I'm showing you here, they say these are 2 broad dimensions of technology in finance and retail finance. This transaction being about simple, low cost, fast convenience. Check mark. For neo-brokers, payments, I've missed that so far, but that's the success of Klarna and others. It's extremely successful. Does it really help improve decision making? I don't know. Maybe it even leads to over-consuming for some people, yeah, and over-indebtedness at some point in time. So that's the transaction argument. That this transaction is not so important, the simplicity, low cost, and so on, for advisory, pension, insurance, because there's no frequent transactions. You do it once a year, maybe it's once a year lifetime. So people, of course, it's important, it's convenient, but that's not key, I argue. What is key is decision quality. And advisory is a credence good, so that's notoriously difficult to detect and to measure. But my argument here is that neo-brokers are extremely successful because they solve the efficiency, the transaction part, but not yet the decision part, but that's not their business necessarily, because these are mostly do-it-yourself people. Now, when you talk about advisory and pension and also insurance, and that's your topic here, as I understand, then it has not been solved because it is notoriously difficult to improve decision-making in finance, because it becomes, and especially when we talk about pension, it's an extremely complex decision for the individual, okay? And ideally, high decision quality translates into it's intuitive, it's coherent, of course, some optimization going on, it's robust, it's salient, so it's tangible for people, it's trustworthy, and it's tailored. So many requirements, and they have not yet been fulfilled, at least from what I see. So this graph is not 100% accurate. I just sketched it down yesterday, just to, when we talk about pension planning, pension finance, pension products, and you want to improve decision quality, then you require a lot of information to come up with, this is the ideal pension product for you now. What you ideally know is, well, when do you want to retire? That's simple. Then ideally, if it's not an annuity, or even if it's an annuity, because that defines the relative price, what's your life expectancy? Then you need to know, because ideally you want to smooth your consumption across your entire life cycle. How is your salary, your income developing? What about your consumption preferences? What about your preference in general? What about your risk preferences? What about your bequest motives? What about the risk of getting jobless, and so on? So this is a long list. Actually, an ideal decision making for this is how much you should be saving, at what risk, for what long time, or for which time horizon, would require or required a lot of information that is typically not at hand, or very expensive to acquire for a consultant, for an advisor, or for the individual. Yeah. So these are just some examples. And I'm not an advisor, but if I was an advisor to somebody else and he asked me, so I think about doing private pension, then I need to ask actually and get information and data about these basic questions. And here are some examples of what I'd like to know. So first of all, I'd like to understand, so, okay, talk about your pension. What's your pension claim right now? What's your envisioned pension claim from the 3 pillars? What is your wealth? What are your liabilities? What are your goals, and so on? So where am I today? What's cash, deposits? Well, thanks to open banking, this information is available. But what about any pension products, life assurance that you already have? Can I see the contracts? How much? Do you have real estate? Maybe you inherit some real estate at some point in time. What about other assets? Do you have a brokerage account, and so on? What about your preferences? What about your beliefs, and so on? So this is required data if you want to do it accurate and ideally also precise advice. So second dimension is, where do you want to be? What are your goals? And we all know, if you ask people for their goals, I don't know. Well, a decent retirement, maybe purchase a house at some point in time, but I don't know when and where. So that's also very difficult to come up and to help people, give them guidance of what are realistic goals and what are their beliefs, what are life events that are likely, what is the likelihood that they lose their job, and so on. And then, of course, how do I get there from here to there? And here's some buzzwords of also what technology would allow us to do, given the information, given the data. So goal-based asset liabilities, because goals are liabilities. These are provisions. I'm provisioning for something. I don't know when and how much money I need. And the asset side is, well, what I have right now and how my income is developing, and so on. So cutting this short a bit here. So my point, last 2 slides, extremely difficult. We all know. And that's why hardly anybody likes this topic. And most people shun pension advice and talk and think about it, because it gets complex so far and it becomes a black box. So the whole idea, I almost say, of pension planning and retirement and pension reporting is to try to find answers, at least for this first dimension, namely, where am I today? What are my current claims? What are my current assets? And maybe give people guidance on how much pension do I need? Actually, do I want in several scenarios? And then that's not necessarily, or that's actually not the goal and the task of a pension planning engine. How do I get there? So products is out of scope because this is shall be independent, trustworthy, so there shall not be any conflicts of interest here. But still, one could help people in sketching out a way and maybe showing scenarios of if you start a pension plan with standard assumptions, this is where it would bring you to. And so this is what digitalization, I believe, holds as a promise, namely reducing the cost of collecting this data and helping people answering these questions. All right, so here's the summary and say why, I mean, these questions are decades old, yeah, and there are solutions, and this is retirement advisory, retirement planning, but it's very expensive, as we all know, because it requires a lot of manual work, and maybe many people are not willing to share all this information. So this whole idea about open banking and now the initiatives around open insurance leading to open finance, this will help to make more and better data, individual data, accessible to pension planning. Yeah. Then what about the algorithms that synchronize the data and translate them into future claims? I believe this could be an open source endeavor, because if we have different models, very different models, then people might get confused because they talk to one and then to another, and results are very different. So that's at least the idea of maybe installing a utility that does this general forecasting. And maybe also provides benchmarks based on peer data and so on. So there could be a role for utility that does the calculation. Yeah. And then finally, better planning enabled by cockpits. That's the MVP idea. Ours is called Renten Cockpit. You could also call it pension dashboard. Yeah. So that's somewhat the bottom line why I believe that the digitalization could be a game changer, and we see already some first instances, but better access to data, then more trustworthy calculation engines that build on the data pool for an individual, and then clever, tailor-made front ends, if you wish, that target a specific group, let's say women at the age of 35, 45, maybe family or single, whatever, that provide an experience, a user experience that helps people overcome the threshold of talking and dealing with this topic. Okay. All right, I skipped this one, and these are some screenshots. And actually, given that we are 24 minutes in the talk, I'm just switching to the live demo, but I have a sip of water and just have a look at the chat, or give you the opportunity if you want. There's actually something in the chat. But in the chat, Gert and Jürgen said just post anything if you wish. Okay, so feel free. Do you have questions or comments so far? Otherwise, I stop sharing and then share anew. Here we go. So let me see. So Jürgen, maybe you can just confirm that you view a browser screen that says the pension cockpit.
Yes, it's getting through just fine.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's a landing page, and I'm already apologizing for any poor English language, because this was actually started in German. Just we want to demonstrate this is multi-language, of course, and the next language would be Turkish in a German context, and then Polish. But this is the landing page. So this is our MVP. It's not the full answer yet on the questions or on the prospects that I sketched out on my slides, but it's an effort, or it's an attempt of drawing the data together and actually doing some very explorative work for the German context, getting automated insurance contract data into a cockpit or pension dashboard for the first time, and also using a calculation engine that is able to synchronize different claims, even real estate. So here's the landing page, and that's the example. So we have for persona, this is Chan, and that's the pension dashboard for Chan. The summary, it's a bar chart. We tried many things, but bar chart seemed to be a very simple one. And you already see that it goes a bit beyond just reporting. Well, it is still reporting, but it has some features that allow you a bit to simulate, to plan ahead. So one feature is that it gives you not only gross, but after-tax numbers. So of course, we apply a couple of assumptions, and here we are using the taxation schedule for the current one for Germany, although we are talking about income at age 67 for Chan, and Chan is now, I don't know, 47 or 37, so this is 20 or 30 years down the road, and we need to make some assumptions also for inflation and so on. But that's the idea. So these are just some examples, and if you say, yeah, give it a try, you can register here, or I'm going to show you now a test user. So this is online, but you need an access password from me, and if you're interested in, I'm happy to share it. But so here's a test user, and don't be now surprised. This cockpit is already pre-filled with many claims because, well, I want to show you what is possible. So this is test user 1, and again, you have this summary here, gross and net basis, and this person has already many claims. Yeah, and one feature that shows up here, and this is this little label here, is one feature that I deem, not me personally also, but also the feedback from people indicated that this is important, because many people don't plan their pension only for themselves, but for their household. So actually, this is already a combined dashboard of test user 1 and her husband, test user 3. Actually, you see test user and so on, you can operate this pension cockpit fully anonymously. Yeah, so there's no name required. And actually, even account number are masked. And you are asked once you log out whether all the data shall be deleted. So this is very data lean. And also you can, as I said, operate this without any name. So here, this is test user 1 and her husband, test user 3. And the husband, actually, if I go to account sharing here, then the husband, namely test user 3, approved of or gave the permit to test user 1 to edit the claims of the husband and to view it. So there's an edit mode and a new mode. In this case, it's even an edit mode. So test user 1, I call it the wife, can actually also play around with the scenarios of her husband. But they have the consolidated household view of their pensions. Okay, so what's in? And here also maybe what happens if I retire early, then the numbers will change accordingly. Yeah, so that's another scenario. The target income. So how much do I need or want? I'll come back to this in a second. Well, there's not too many seconds left, so I go ahead. So how does the information get into the pension dashboard? So there are 3 ways. One is manual input. So if you want to add a product, it's actually not adding a product, but it's this one here, upload, then there's always the possibility to enter data manually. And our calculation engine allows for all possible, all classical and exotic, so workplace pension, private pension, civil servant pension, and public pension can be processed. And so one way is manual. That's not the way to go, much too failure prone. And the other one is upload a document. So for the public pension scheme in Germany, because there's no API, there's no electronic interface, what we require people to do is to take a picture of their report. That's a 2-pager, and then upload it. And then we use OCR technology to extract the data, and that's the data for the public pension scheme. So that's mirroring the information on the sheet, and you can play around it. That's just reporting different numbers on the sheet, but we go slightly beyond, because you can also change some assumptions, because the public pension scheme in reporting to you assumes that your salary will evolve as it did over the last 5 years. And you can adjust this and say, no, my pay or my salary will actually increase stronger or less so. And then you can individualize it. Okay, so this is the public pension scheme. That's not ideal, but this is the way that we have to go. We have to improvise, because there are no automatic or no APIs for some purposes. Here is actually an insurance contract from the husband, and that's actually, now I switch it on. And the information here is entered not through OCR technology, but this is a world premiere, well, German premiere, because this insurance company is one of our cooperating partners, and we built an interface, and it's much more than an interface, a whole process that allows us to fetch contract information, contract data on behalf of the user. Yeah, so we get an electronic mandate, we identify the person through an identification provider, and then we also need to ask for the contract information. Then we shoot this information to the insurance company. They get to the Bestandssysteme, to their data repository, contract repository, and then feed us back the information that can be viewed here. Okay, so that is already automatic, but at this point only with a few insurance companies. Then next one is property. So there's real estate, whether you already own it or whether you plan to inherit it, or whether you just want to try out what's the value of a piece of real estate. And this is an API with a provider of market data on residential property. So if you add a property, then this mask opens up, and you can KBC and then fill in just a couple of information, actually, garage type 1 and 3. So that's a matter of 2 minutes, and it has this automatic address. So this is address here and so on. And then you shoot it, and then you get the information back. And here, 2 examples, one owned by the wife and one owned by the husband. And this is also translated in an annuity. So these pensions are annuities in a narrow sense, yeah, the lifelong payments, and actually the rent that you receive is equivalent, yeah. And here, of course, it's pre-tax, after tax, but that can be treated as a pension if you assume that this piece of real estate will still be there, that you rent it out once you retire. And then we have banking, even checking accounts, current accounts, or savings accounts. This comes through access to accounts, or PSD2. So if you add an account, then you're asked for your bank information, your credentials, and these are linked. So how do we translate a brokerage account? And this is the example here. So the current account balance is 17,000. What we require, we want to keep it simple, is asking for, so what's your equity ratio actually in your account? And let's say it's 50%. And then we just do a general assumption regarding the equity premium, 50%, 3% return. And we use this return to compound the current account balance to the point of retirement. And then we buy a virtual annuity. So actually, this is then treated like an annuity from the public pension, unless you tell the system, which is done here, no, I don't use this money, or don't want to use it for a lifelong annuity. Actually, I want to use this money for the first 10 years of my retirement, because this is for traveling. And then it gives you this disclaimer and says, okay, it's 830 euros, that's the expected values, but that's a monthly income only for the first 10 years of your retirement, because it's not an annuity. Okay, but you can, of course, then go back and forth. So this is how we can synchronize, translate real estate, securities, savings account return, expected return is simply 0 right now. So same idea. and pension products in a narrow sense, all into one figure, namely the monthly income once you retire. We don't look at how this progresses through time. We want to keep it simple. And well, this is the number. This is pension reporting. Now we have these additional features that at least move into the direction of pension planning. The last one that I want to demonstrate to you is how do we help people answering the question of where do I want to be? What is my goal? What is my pension ambition? And here we're using data from research. So we have many thousands of anonymized, of course, data points. And this is checking account data of also retired people. So here's a couple of thousand retired people, and we clustered them. And now we ask the user, okay, now if when you envision your retirement age, so we're using, these are 24 groups, and we ask you, do you want to live in a city or on the countryside? Do you plan to rent a place once you are retired, or do you live in your own place? And then in what do you believe? Is it going to be high income, low income? Because this was discriminating a lot in our research data. And then are you going to live alone or in a couple? And once you, well, do the selection, then what you get here is true data or true averages of real data of today's retired people. So for renting, well, this is somebody who's owning a house, so rent is low. And if you believe, well, but private health insurance, then this number must be higher, of course. Then you adjust it, and then you arrive at the total, and this is then by also imputed by 1.2% inflation per year to the point of retirement. So this is your aspiration level for retirement. So that's the number that appears here. So these people are happy as a couple to already be beyond, above this value. But if they say, well, maybe, but I forgot, because this is actually the place that we're going to live in, so we cannot rent it out, the numbers will look differently after tax. Yeah, so that's precisely the simulation that can be conducted. Already. Do I have slides? Yeah, I actually have more slides, but in the interest of time, don't want to steal time from the discussion. If there are no questions and so on, I can share another slides of where we are going at. But I stop here, and I'm happy to hear your comments. Actually, very eager to learn what you think and what your own thoughts are or your experience are from the country, for example, where you are. Okay. Our
We have a
advisors
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it as well, Andreas, in the chat. We have one question. If
I do.
advisors are proactively responding to the client's cockpit, yes or no?
Yeah. So first question, I don't know, because this is not yet in production. So this is testing, and we have closed testing with individuals, and we have not yet involved advisors. But that's precisely an idea that for people, and this, as you have seen, can get fairly complicated. So the tool as such has very nice features, but for many people, they need much more guidance. And precisely this is a scenario that we could envision. Namely, somebody says, well, I need help, advice, even in using this tool. So I'm providing editing mode or even a viewing mode to somebody else, to an advisor, or we sit in front of the screen together, and then you can use the tool also to explain and to do financial education. There's one more interesting feature I find, namely that's the part where the advisor can actually simulate solutions. So an advisor could say, okay, this is your situation right now, and you need 500 euros more in pension. So here's an idea that I have that would be very fitting to your situation. And why don't I share this product with your cockpit? So if you, here's my email address, and actually I do it for you. And then I am not your husband, but I'm your advisor. And then it says advisor, and then a product that I'm suggesting to you or proposing to you is appearing in your individual dashboard, and you can try it out and see whether and how it helps. Yeah, and so this would help advisors. So our advisors also proactively responding. I could imagine that this could provide very helpful for advisors, foremost because they don't have to spend all the time to collect all the information data from the client.
Mhm. And in the beginning, Andreas, you mentioned that, or you referred to the fact that this project is also a collaboration. Maybe related to the previous question, are there also in that collaboration financial institutions involved, where, for example, input from advisors could be taken on in the further development?
Yeah. That is true. So there have been several stages already of this whole project. Yeah, it's not that we started last year. We started in 2017. Actually, we had a pilot back then with Clark. That's an insurance broker startup. Yeah, but we are fully separate. So this was just to letting you know that we started out very early to test the waters and so on. And then in 2018, we decided that we built a platform, and that is the result. And in this early phase, there were 15 collaborators, partners from industry, large banks, large insurance companies, but also technology companies, and so on. And the idea was that we learn from each other, learn from client requests, learn from technology, and so on. They don't have ownership or usage rights in this platform. This is important. This is a neutral, independent endeavor. And that's why I said in the early, that's university. Now we are branching out a bit. So one project actually where we are in close talks and about to close a cooperation or close a deal towards a cooperation is where we said, well, in order to help to give more guidance to people, we need a front end, an app that is much more user friendly than this one. Yeah, that has a sound onboarding that helps people to run through this cockpit, and then also helps people to find solutions. And then, of course, you need to think about what are solutions that at some point in time you enter the product world. But this must be fully separate from what I'm showing you. And so we have this separate activity, a development and exploration task where we are about to cooperate with one or several financial institutions. That's also in a testing environment, but where we get much more concrete and where we actually develop an app. This is web-based, also works on iPad and so on. But as you all see, the whole touch and feel is not extremely user-friendly. Yeah, so that's indeed one project stream that we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the meantime, I see that we have also another question in the chat, content related, I would say. And it reads, there's a strong focus in the tool on annuities. Isn't it difficult to convince savers to transform their savings capital into annuities? And how do you handle the bequest objective in the goals?
Yeah, so two questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first, annuity reporting, or the format of reporting everything is an annuity, stems from the, I'd say, from the initial thrust of the project, almost mandate. I told you that in Germany there's going to be the central agency to report pension claims to people. Yeah, and for most people the starting point is the public pension, and that's an annuity. So that's the default. Yeah, and that can only be reported in monthly income. Yeah, and it doesn't make too much sense to report this on a present value basis. Yeah, so if this is the default and this is what people know, what you want to have in the tool is that people first of all recognize, yeah, that's my main part, pension part, and then of course you could say this is an annuity, and then you have a security account, a brokerage, and you have a piece of real estate, and this has a value, this is a capital amount. But then how do you square this? And what we learned is people need one number. Yeah, and to understand how much do I have, how much do I need, and that's our format. We translate everything into this one number. But of course, if you want to know what's the value of my piece of real estate, or what is the value of my brokerage account, and what if I don't buy an annuity, and don't ask people to buy an annuity. It's just in annuity terms, expressed in terms, but they're still free to do whatever they want. Yeah, so it's a financial education tool, let's say, of helping people understand of where they stand, instead of giving it a table, guaranteed, possible additional capital, annuity, savings plan, merging this into one number. Your second question, bequest motive. Well, this is not delivered by this tool, and this is why has this narrow focus. But at the end, if you have a bequest motive, then this is another provisioning, and this needs to be distracted from what you can consume in your pension. So if you have a bequest motive of the real estate, and depending on when you want to bequeath it to somebody else, you switch it off, because that's not part of your pension. That's part of your, I don't know whether that's a correct word, bequeath or a bequest to somebody else. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think about not only making static return here. Of course, one could do all kinds of simulations, but this is an interesting point. How do you report it? So this is already extremely complex, what I've shown you, for most people, not for you, yeah, but for most people. Now, if I tell them, look, this is the expected value, and here's the confidence interval, and here's a distribution of what might happen, I tell you, no way. The way to deal with risk, because of course, one way we need to, because otherwise people trust, say, well, I'm rich, or this is the number that I can build upon. The way we approach this is by scenarios, not by Monte Carlo scenarios like 1,000, but by helping people to understand, what if there's a crash, a market crash? What if this or this happens? And then, rather by point estimates, giving people an impression of the range of values that could be there. Yeah, so that's at least our current stance on dealing with risk.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. And thanks everybody indeed for the interaction. I would propose to maybe close it off here. On this slide, you can see a code linking to the profile of Andreas on LinkedIn, as he invited you to reach out. I mean, if interested to stay in touch, that's an opportunity. And let me end today's session, if I may, by announcing our speaker for the February webinar. So in the session of February, we have Professor Alessandro Privetero, who is a finance professor at Indiana University and actually a former co-author also of Andreas. And Professor Privetero will inform us or share his insights on some of his recent research. And a provocative title of a recent publication was "The Misguided Beliefs of Advisors." So I'm curious to know what that is all about. So let me invite you to join in next month, where he will inspire you on how to tailor your financial advice in a digital context. Do not forget, please, to register beforehand. It's for free, but it helps us prepare accordingly. For today's session, before leaving, please spend some time in filling in the evaluation. It always helps us to pay attention to continuous improvement. And so once again, thanks for joining today for the live interaction. Looking forward to seeing all of you next month. And thanks you, Professor Hackethal, today for your very interesting session.
My pleasure. And clear recommendation. Alessandro is a super person, but of course, super researcher here. Yeah. Very inspiring. So please do yourself the favor and participate in next month's talk. So Ale is a superstar at research.
Okay. Thanks a lot for now, and see you all next month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.